The Mayo Experience.
That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by DraftKings 2023. The hell is this called? The CJ Cup at Palmetto. So another new venue for the CJ Cup. And it's funny because CJ is sponsoring it, the Korean company. And this was going to be on Jeju Island every single year. A no-cut event to start off the Asian swing. And now it's in South Carolina. It was in Vegas for like 2 years, I think. Maybe it was at Sherwood one of those years. Anyway, COVID screwed up this title sponsor of this tournament. Now it's in South Carolina. Where they have been once before for the Palmetto, stepping in for the Canadian Open 2 years ago. Gareth Higo won that year. If people remember, a lot of sand all around. Really cool golf course by and large, like when you look at it. So a reminder to smash the like for the episode, sub to Mayo Media Network, all that fun stuff. Download, rate, and review. We're doing more golf as the season comes to a close. Have a special giveaway for the RSM Classic coming up in about a month's time as well. So continue to go into that. And Fantasy Golf Degenerates Monday evening on Mayo Media Network for a more in-depth DraftKings breakdown of everything that's going on. I want to talk a little bit about DraftKings. The pricing just came out. I want to talk about some bets. I want to talk about the course. No better person to do that with than Ryan Noonan of betspurts.com. Go to Bets. You got a promo code of BetSpurts or what?
4 for 4. If they want to get a betting subscription to 4 for 4, you use Noonan 10. We'll get you 10% off. You can slide into DMs. I might even be able to get you 25% off at this time of year.
But why did I get the 10% off? I can get the 25% off.
This is just for your audience. So 10% is out there in public. 25% is for the Mayo Media Network listeners.
Well, there we are. So the Listeners League for golf is gone until the new year, but there is a Listeners League for football, and that is now open. You get first crack at it, my loyal golf viewing audience. If you want to play in the Pat Mayo Experience Listeners League, the link is down in the description right now. I'll be walking through with fantasynational.com/Mayo for 20% off. You want like the Fantasy National of football? Run thesims.com/Mayo. Get yourself a discount. It has pure optimization, pure customization, betting, DFS, whatever you want. You can hop into that. Where do you want to start with this? What do you remember about this course where Higo won?
Yeah, like you said, long, a lot of sand. And what is notable there too is because there is very little rough. So the sand play is just kind of natural. I think, as you mentioned too, similar to what we saw in a lot of these South Carolina courses. It's not actually a penalty. You can ground your club because it's just these natural runoffs. A lot of natural runoffs on the greens too. So short game comes into play. But when you look at the Palmetto leaderboard, it was Bombers Paradise. So a very long par 71 track, a lot of like long approach shots too. So like length matters. And this is not a typical birdie fest that we see here in the swing season. And similar to last week where we had at the Zozo, we have a pretty loaded field, 78 guys, no cut event. So like, it's fun to go down the board and to get some literal bombs. But like, when you look at this field, it's hard to really think that one of these top guys isn't going to find their way through 4 rounds and compete. So, but it is a tough track, right? We've been dealing with a lot of this stuff that we get here where you need to get into the low 20s. I just don't think we see that here.
Hey, did you watch much of the Zozo? Because the Zozo Championship last week, it's funny because there was a Euro event, there was a Live event, there was the PGA event. They were all on at really wonky times for living in North America. I think it's the first tournament I didn't bet or play DraftKings on or even cover in years. I wasn't going to wake up in the middle of the night to watch Ricky Fowler blow it. I just didn't want to do it.
Well, I feel responsible. I feel like I talked you out of it. You asked me, should I cover that tournament or should I cover the challenge? And I nudged you to do a challenge show, which I think was probably the better way to go. I did watch a little just because it's like primetime golf, which is pretty sweet. You're like, kids go to bed, wife falls asleep, and I can turn on the Golf Channel and watch a little bit of Japanese golf. So tough track as well. And it was a little decent. I didn't watch much Sunday because, Saturday, Sunday is consumed with football stuff, but I'm excited to get back into a normal schedule.
Well, it actually worked out a lot better for me last week, not doing the Zozo and doing the challenge instead, because I could film the challenge on Saturday. I popped positive for COVID that day. And like Monday I didn't do anything on Monday. Like Monday was a bad day for any productivity. It was just a lot of laying on the couch underneath of a blanket. So I wouldn't have done the show anyway. And I just didn't feel like I didn't do any research. I mean, I should have just tailed everyone who bet Keegan Bradley, I suppose. Did you bet him?
I did not bet him. I actually decided to go with the top of the board. I went Xander. I'm like, hey, we got Xander in a back in Japan. We get the good vibes from the Olympic medal. We know historically we love Xander in these no cut events. Did not come to fruition. And I also bet Sahith, and we got a little tease on Sahith on a nice run on Sunday, and that came crashing down too. So yeah, no winners for me on the Zozo.
Let's take a look back at what happened at the Palmetto Championship. You mentioned Higo won. He was 11 under par that week. And you can see he just kind of gained across the board. He was the only one of the guys like inside the top 10 who didn't gain a bunch around the greens. Johnny Vegas did. But you said there was a bunch of bombers. Like, I look at this. Yeah, there's bombers up there, but like Higo's not the biggest bomber. And this wasn't the strongest field at the same time. But like Hatton's not really a bomber. If Hatton could have made a putt that week, he would have won. So I'm not tied to the concept that you have to be like some sort of extraordinary length off the tee in order to win this tournament.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, there are, the Ryan Armours of the world who, got red hot on Sunday and went 7 under and found himself inside the top 10. But because I think the layout of the course, because there is no rough, because the fairways are pretty wide, I think you got these guys are taking driver out a lot. No one's really clubbing down to find the fairway here. We're not dealing with a ton of like trees or dog legs. So I think distance is going to be rewarded, because even with hitting a lot of drivers, we're seeing when you look at like approaches from 250 plus, it's like, I don't know, a third more than the typical event here. Not a lot of like short irons in. Basically anything from the 75 to 175 range is below tour average. So yeah, maybe you don't have to be a bomber here. You can obviously find almost any course for the most part. You can find a few guys that can mix in, but a lot of the guys at the top were, guys who hit long that week. You don't have to be accurate at all, because like Higo was not, he was spraying it all over. But if you're have the rest of the game dialed in, you can find those irons too. I think you want to lean guys that are comfortable with the driver. So again, it's really hard. We have 4 rounds here, right? So it's hard to kind of feel like that's sticky statistically.
Even to look at it right now, just like sorting back through like driving distance gained, Wilco ended up inside the top 15. So, yeah. When he's up there, it's usually going pretty well. So you had Wilco, Dustin, and Vegas as like the big bombers. Even Will Gordon, for that matter. Tane Lee as well. I remember he was out there. I just remember this was a week I won a ton of money because I had a bunch of Higo, a bunch of Hatton, and Bo Van Pelt was like my super sleeper of the week. And he ended up coming inside the top 5. And for a moment, I thought he was going to win. And I was like, oh my God. That didn't come to fruition. But a second place was good enough from like a $6,200 Bo Van Pelt that week. I don't know why I liked him so much. I think it's just the ball striking was off the charts. So looking at it now, like Higo gained, Swafford gained, Hatton gained, Hadley barely gained, Redmond and Bo didn't. So when we took a look at like how they got there in terms of strokes gained, it was just all up. Like if you hit your approaches well here, like that's really going to be the key, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it wasn't just that for Higo. I mean, the approach game was nice. Hatton's not a guy that we typically think about as a bomber per se. He was dialed in with the irons and got himself there. Same thing with Doc Redmond, another guy that we don't always think of as profile as a bomber per se. So it's not shocking in any course really. If you're kind of dialed in tee to green, you're going to find yourself there. Chesson Hadley's pretty much the only guy that kind of stands out as he did it mostly through putting. Could not do it on Sunday, collapsed in a big way, had this under control, if we can remember back to that one, but collapsed with a 4 over on Sunday. But I still think when I'm kind of building a card or maybe building DraftKings lineups, I'm probably going to lean that way, because I just think you're going to give yourself the best shot to get in closer to these pins, because you're going to be farther away.
Well, let's take a look at the breakdown of how this played out in 2021, just to see if we can get a sense of it. Like around the green, didn't really mean much. It was almost like a dead split between approach and off the tee amongst top 10 finishers. I don't know if I've ever seen the split that close, to tell you the truth. I wonder how, if we go to top 5, how more pronounced it is. Now it's about even, so you can weight those about even. Par 5 scoring is huge here. I mean, par 4 scoring meant relatively little, which is just a weird course in general, then just based on the profile. And maybe it's because, like you mentioned, we only have the 4-round sample of what's going on, but the average shot distribution, the plurality of shots coming from 200 plus, 175 to 200, 150 to 175, like that's where the majority of your strokes, 150 plus. So there's not like a lot of wedges in, like you had mentioned, the cut line was +2 in 2021. Obviously, there's no cut this week, only 78 players. Driving accuracy way up, greens of regulation way down, which is really strange. I guess it was easy to scramble. It was easier than your tour average event, but the green of regulation was below tour average, yet around the green meant like absolutely nothing, which is strange.
It is strange. And it is strange, unusual too, when you have these places where we have like the short grass runoffs around the green too. We typically see approach play or around the green stuff matter a lot. And it just didn't hold up here last time. So again, super noisy because we just had the 4 rounds, but it's kind of how it went last time. But yeah, I mean, you look at kind of the average strokes gained off the tee in a typical event. This is almost double tour average. And they had the longest average drive on tour in 2021 when they played here. So I do think we're going to have to kind of lean that way.
All right. So I want to take a look at the model that I used then. I mean, it worked, so might as well go back to it, right? Strokes gained off the tee, 25%. Approach 30, around the green 10, putting 10. So that gets us our 4 main ones. 450 to 500 yard par 4, 10%. Proximity 200 plus 10%. And sand saves 5%. Do you think there's anything you would throw into that? Like, you can go with opportunities gained, but it doesn't strike me as a course where, like you said, like -20, maybe someone gets there. But the fact that no one got better than -11 last time, and I would assume that with the better players, maybe the course plays a little bit more difficult. Obviously, a different time of year that we're seeing this course too, months after that we saw it in the middle of summer. But I think I'm pretty good with rolling those out as the stats to look at.
I think that's a pretty good point too. We are playing at a different time of year. I think we want to maybe include 3-putt avoidance or, bogey avoidance of some sort, because we do have some pretty large greens, and because we do have a large plurality of approaches coming from further out, as you mentioned, 200 plus, you're probably going to have to be a pretty good lag putter, I think, here, because you're not going to be necessarily dialed in from like a lot of makeable putts. So I think maybe highlighting that and giving that a little bit of a look. Maybe, like you said, maybe it's not something that you give a lot of weight into the model, but maybe you pull it anyway, just to kind of see who populates there and see how they kind of, work with everything else that you're feeding into the model.
I like that. So I'll throw a 3-putt avoidance on. I'm going to weight it at 0% just so I can have a good look at it. I'm actually going to get rid of putting, put putting down at the bottom to customize this a little bit easier to read for myself when I go through it, that I can have the 2 putting stats directly next to each other. So reweight that in at 10%, and we'll run it. See what the numbers like this week. At a no-cut event, like, I hate no-cut events to begin with. I really don't like how we get these like super events with this new PGA season. And like, yeah, everyone did show up to play here. Like, it's all these guys hate live so much, and all they want to do is play in no-cut events.
I don't love them either. I agree. I think sometimes when we spend so much time handicapping, part of our leg up over time will be understanding who just doesn't fit here and who won't even be around. And like, I was talking about, I bet Sahith last week, if there's a cut, Sahith doesn't see Saturday to go, 7 under. So it was probably just a bad play. So yeah, I'm not a big, small field, no cut event guy either, but at least this one's loaded. So it should be at least fun to watch.
All right, so I've pulled up the numbers. They've run the numbers for themselves. Again, fantasynational.com/Mayo to get yourself the 20% off. Run your own numbers on this. So of the very top guys, it's funny because like Rahm is slipping a little bit, and so is Matthew Fitzpatrick and Sam Burns. They're like the worst of the top end. Rory being the best. JT Scheffler 1, 2, 3. Homa 4. Sung Jae number 5, as you can see on the screen right now. That's over the past 50 rounds as well. We could shrink that down, but this doesn't include Rahm, who just won in Spain against like a bunch of jabronis, but he still won. Fitzpatrick just won in Italy, didn't he?
Yep.
So
yeah,
the guys that are lagging a little bit are actually still playing pretty well in terms of recent form.
Yeah, I mean, wins are wins, right? We don't want to give Rahm any credit for Mexico. No one wants to give him any credit for Spain. So you'd rather see him not lose in those fields, right? Because then what would we do to him then? So you want to give him credit for, going out there and winning. So interested to see, like, Burns really hasn't been great, even like towards the tail end of the stretch of last season. Obviously, we're in the Southeast. Feel pretty good about Burns on Bermuda. Feel pretty good about Burns where, distance matters too. Played okay at the President's Cup, but that's also part of it too, right? We're also piecing together really scattered form because these guys just haven't played much. It's really hard to gather anything from the President's Cup because it is such a different format. So that's kind of the hardest part of handicapping these things too, is we are in the middle of the season where like we've seen these guys in like 4 out of the last 5 weeks, or we know how they play here. So like there's so many different elements that make, I think, these events even harder to handicap.
The best cheap guy right now, long term, is Mito, who I believe blew up at the Zozo over the weekend, didn't he?
I bet Mito, and he like just great round 1, and I think he just went in the can in round 2. I think it was like 6 over or something like that at some point. And yeah, no one else was doing that on the day too. So it wasn't anything it was lift clean in place. So, I mean, you got to be able to do something on lift clean in place, but Mito could not. Decent weekend, got himself back in the mix, but it wasn't enough.
Yeah, he was 4th at the Shriners, gained almost 10 strokes on approach. As you can see, like the last 3 events, and I assume we're not going to have strokes gained for the Zozo because it doesn't work that way. But it's probably 4 events in a row he's lost off the tee. Doesn't feel like he can get away with that here, which is strange because he was so good off the tee from Honda all the way through basically like the Travelers right before the Open Championship.
I don't know what the 18th on Sunday at Southern Hills, I think, is just maybe kind of lingering.
I guess so. Yeah. Putting it there when you should win the PGA Championship. This is how it goes, I guess. But of like the cheap guys on DraftKings, Mito at 76, Aaron Wise at 78. Oh, can we consider this a coastal course for Aaron Wise?
Man, Pat, like you don't need a lot for me to get to Aaron Wise. I am, it's maybe DraftKings. I don't know that he's going to win this event. I think we're close. I don't know how close this is to the coastal courses, but it's close enough. You want to tell yourself a story. He's been so good, tee to green. There's always one round where he just can't really put it together and leaves himself on the outside looking in. But his number, I haven't looked at DraftKings pricing, just been in the betting market so far, but 50s, 45 on DraftKings Sportsbook. It's just guys, I'd rather go a little bit up the board a little bit. I think that could actually win this event.
So he's 78 on DraftKings. Munoz is 73. It's funny, although like you talk about how this is sort of like a bomber's course. Like, do we just keep betting Griot until maybe he wins?
Yeah, last week was the first time in a couple that I haven't bet him. The ride can be really up and down on the greens, but the driver is almost a weapon for him at this point. He'd be so good tee to green. So yeah, I mean, I don't hate it. 70 on DraftKings to bet Grillo here. I think he's probably a really good look on DraftKings in DFS. So yeah, I don't hate it at all. Kind of those guys that are down there, like Killer Keith, maybe. I mean, this is, Keith Mitchell, Southeast, driving distance too. He's kind of in that same bucket of guys that I'd consider.
Yeah, Griot, I don't know how he ended up going 4th at the Zozo last week, so I assume he putted well, but that's like 9 consecutive events where he's gained on the greens. Like, I don't quite know how this happened.
Right, where did this come from? Like, he was just an absolute mess I barely even talked about him for 6 months to a year because he just really was never in contention. We knew that he could probably pop in some long-term form stuff on approach. But that was really about it. But yeah, he's loving the swing season. It was nice actually to the tail end of the regular season too. So may as well ride it. Another guy that's kind of in that bucket for me is Cam Davis, who surprised us, I think, when we went over to where was he? Sea Island or he came to second in Jordan, didn't he, at Harbortown, which is not something you would think of as a Cam Davis course. And Cam Davis played really well in the President's Cup, like drove it really well. I think really nice at either Sanderson or the Fortinet. I can't think of which one, but so, decent form towards the tail end of the year too. I think he's probably another guy that's kind of down in that range that is interesting to me too.
Rates out number 21 over the past 50 rounds. Yeah, the Shriners, Fortinet didn't really do much at either one of those two. I like him at the shorter courses, weirdly enough. Like you see a top 10 at John Deere, top 10 at Colonial, top 10 at Heritage. He might just be one of those guys where, yeah, he has all the distance in the world, but when you get him at a course where it's a lot shorter, and that might mean a lot more if you can keep it a bit straight or improve your accuracy so much by clubbing down. Those seem to be the kind of courses where it's kind of his jam. This isn't one of those.
It's like Gary Woodland, maybe, right?
Yeah.
So like Woodland has the distance, but we kind of like Woodland a little bit more when he can club down, use the stinger and some of those things. So yeah, maybe you're onto something.
So Sam Burns, 93. So he's kind of like the worst of the top end guys. Gary Woodland does rate out really well. I feel like I've been like playing Woodland, it just keeps missing cuts. And so he's always right there. Yeah, you see his approach numbers are really good. His putter has been absolutely god awful 2 rounds, 6 strokes lost, and then back in the playoffs, 5 strokes over 4 rounds. It does seem like the approach game is back, though, and that's good. And the driving has been back. Maybe it's a time to get on Gary.
Yeah, but maybe we just talked ourselves out of it too, because this is, I think, something that we think is a long course, right? So
yeah, but it's different when someone like Cam Davis. What is Cam Davis? Cam Davis is 7,500. Gary Woodland's $6,400 on DraftKings.
Yeah, no, that's different for sure. Yeah, I haven't looked at DK pricing, but yeah, that's totally different conversation for sure.
Yeah, Kitayama and Mitchell 72 and 71. Russell Henley. It's bad when the stats don't love Russell Henley. You know he's going bad at that point.
That's not a good thing. Yeah, when we can't get Russell Henley popping because the approach game is on fire, then this is not the place to go.
So I want to jump to the betting market for a second. Rory's the favorite. Obviously, guy's playing great golf. I think he's a top 10 in like every event that he's played over the past little bit. So you got like Rory, Rahm, Scheffler, Homa, JT, Sungjae, Fitzpatrick. They're all under 20-1 on DraftKings Sportsbook. Then you have Lowry, Spieth, Hovland. Hovland seemed like he was going really good in Zozo. And then all of a sudden, I didn't see him on the leaderboard anymore. So you have him at 28, along with Tom Kim, Sam Burns, Cam Young, Morikawa, then to Hatton, and then you're up to like Hideki at 40, Montgomery at 45, Keegan, who just won at 45, Horschel at 45, Aaron Wise at 45. Then there's another big drop down to McNeely, Bezadenhout. Connors is coming in at 65. Probably not great that it's gigantic greens and you can't 3-putt. But Morikawa, I mean, am I just stupid for looking at Morikawa's number like 28-1 and being like, yeah, it's probably a blind bet?
Yeah, I think there were some concerns that he had stated coming into the Zozo that he hadn't been really playing at all. So, but then put it together. Actually had a nice little weekend there and got himself in contention. Same thing, actually, the same number. I bet Hovland this morning because I think same premise, played pretty well. Again, we won't be able to dial into the specifics because we won't get all the strokes gain data, but I like Hovland there too. It was a guy that just at 28 for a little while there was a blind bet too. So like, I have no problem with someone just feeling like, hey, we're kind of pushing 30 on Hovland and Morikawa. We know that like distance can matter, but just at the end of the day, ball striking is going to reign supreme no matter where you are. And I still think Colin's 23, 25. He's still going to be that guy that I think we all thought he was. Just a little rock in the road there last year. So yeah, I think there's sometimes that these guys just approach bad numbers and they become auto bets. So yeah, I know Colin's a guy that you have no problem going back to the well on.
No, yeah, it's tough for me. Like my initial gut when I look at this is like Hovland, Morikawa, Hatton, and that's it. Like just call that my card.
Yeah, mine is very similar. I'm a Max Homa guy. Homa is, I think, off market at some places. He's not 16 everywhere. So I get 16's probably a little bit of a stretch. I don't know that he necessarily belongs up there, but there were 30s out there this morning that popped. So I went Hovland, Homa, and Burns, just thinking like my long-term Burns form is fine. I know he hasn't been great. Again, distance, Bermuda, all those things, but putting, being able to avoid the 3-putts, those are kind of the top of the board guys for me. I'd love to get up to JT, Rory, Rahm, but just really hard to pay single digits in a pretty loaded no-cut event.
Yeah, that's sort of the problem here. Like maybe I guess Xander isn't playing, but Xander was always the ultimate for these, being like, oh yeah, he had a bad Friday. Nah, it doesn't matter. He gets an automatic Saturday and Sunday to go shoot 63. But like Steele was pretty good. Like looking at the shorter term numbers past 24 rounds, Steele and Cam Davis both vault up inside the top 5 after Rory, Sungjae, Justin Thomas, and Scheffler. There was a thing for a while where it would just be like, hey, Sungjae's on Bermuda, let's play him.
I don't hate it. There's nothing to look at Sungjae's recent form, even towards the tail end of last year, and to think that he's not a great fit here. So I can understand, I guess, what is your thought around the travel piece? Is there anyone, like, are you willing to bet the guys that played last week? Do you think there's anything to that? I mean, these guys are flying PJs and they're doing fine. Like, I can't imagine there's anything to that, but you are going from Japan to the East Coast. It's not like it's again, you're tacking on 5 hours if they were to say play in California this week. Is there anything to that where you just want to kind of cross off guys that went to Japan last week?
I don't feel that way ever.
Okay.
And I feel like it's an advantage. Now, I don't know one way or another whether it does affect players, doesn't affect players. I'm sure someone has the numbers on that. I've just never seen them. And I do think that there's this like overwhelming narrative that guys that, oh, you can't play this guy playing in Europe next week because he just played in the States. Like, does that really matter? Like you said, they're flying private. It's going to be absolutely fine. Like, if you can get yourself, they still have days to get themselves acclimated to the time zone. They're playing golf. They're young people. If they do the Pat Mayo tip, the moment they get off the plane, that they just go lift as much as they can, as heavy as they can, for as long as they can, really gets rid of your jet lag pretty immediately.
I didn't know you were pushing weight. What are we doing? You're just benching? You're just trying to max out? Just gets the blood flowing?
Oh, when I get off a plane, well, I mean, it's tough to max out because you go to the hotel and they only have so much weight that you can actually lift in those kind of gyms. Some places you go to have absolutely fantastic facilities. Most don't, but like that's usually my move in Vegas. Like I'm at elevation all of a sudden, like way above where I live, because I live basically at sea level. And then it's still, geez, it's like a 6-hour flight. You're up in the air. You just have to you have to sweat it out a little bit. And I find that I can get a good sweat going if I'm just lifting, like I said, as much as possible. And most of those places don't have bench presses. So it's a lot of like free weights, a lot of like split squats, that kind of thing. Just try to like shrug as much as you can. And I do find I feel so much better afterwards, and I experience no jet lag.
Probably better than you going for a run in altitude. So yeah, it's interesting. So it's not necessarily the weights per se. It's just you want to get a good sweat, a good calorie burn, get everything going.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there's something too, because I used to get off the plane and just go run right away. I feel like running is better getting onto the plane, because then you're not carrying as much water weight with you once you get up into the air, and that can make you really tired. Because I just felt like, even because I used to do that when I would go to Vegas a lot, was just go for a run, like run for half an hour the moment that I get to the hotel before I go do anything. And I there was something with it. Like I would just get so tired by the time it was done that, it didn't really shake off the jet lag. I do find like running versus lifting, when I lift, I have so much more energy afterwards. Whereas like I'm pretty gassed if I go for a run.
And I can imagine even the sea level difference. You're getting that desert heat that is probably very different than Canada, no matter what time of year you're going. So yeah, I haven't heard this theory before, but it makes sense. It's something that I need to do next time I go to Vegas, because I was a moron. And last time I went, decided I want to play some golf courses out here. So even though it was September, I'm like, hey, I'm in Chicago, we're losing the season, I'm going to take my sticks to Vegas and go golf. And it was a unmitigated disaster to play in like 105-degree heat. And yeah, that I probably won't ever do again. So maybe I need to do the gym thing instead.
Wow. See, I love playing in like over 100-degree heat. That is my absolute favorite time to play golf. It gives me such an advantage. I don't get super, like, obviously it's hot, but some people like wither in the heat. Like I played last week, and I think it was like 55 degrees and it was kind of raining, and I just didn't want to play anymore. I was like, this is too cold. I don't like this. I need this to be
too cold to go.
Way hot. Well, it's just because it's so damn, like it was pouring rain,
yeah,
which I don't enjoy anyway. And it was a bit windy, and it started getting down in temperature. I was like, I hate this. Like, this is not fun for me anymore. And I know you play golf to have fun. Much rather have the 100-degree heat than the 50 and soggy with wind and like in October, and then you're fucking freezing.
Yeah, our third from our prop show for 4 Connor Allen played golf with me in this round and made it a whopping 6 holes before throwing up and retiring to the clubhouse for the day to let me do my best to get out there and finish. So he withered. I maintained it because I was pot committed. I'm playing these golf courses. I flew these clubs out here. We're doing this thing. Connor not as in love with the game as I am, but yeah, he spent the rest of the day in the very nicely air-conditioned clubhouse and had himself some food. So it's not for everyone.
No, the last time I was there in February, Rick and I played TPC Summerlin, actually, on like
Nice.
the windiest day of the year. It was insane. Like I was like, is it normally this windy at this course and like this cold at this course? They're like, no, this is an extreme outlier. And I most definitely did not bring, at least you can fly direct from Chicago to Vegas. When I lived in Toronto, it wasn't that big of a deal. Now that I live in Halifax, I have to connect in either Montreal or Toronto to get to Vegas. And the moment that you add a connection in anywhere, just no need to bring your clubs because they're not making it.
No, I know. I went to South Carolina in March, and that was my biggest thing. They actually bumped my flight up. My original flight, I was just convinced there's no chance I'm playing with my clubs, and I'm a lefty too, so it's not super easy to just like walk into the clubhouse and be like, what's on the rack? I got super lucky. I don't know why. The first thing that came off of the belt were my clubs when I finally made it to Hilton Head. So I got lucky. I don't want to press that luck ever again.
All right. Well, as you mentioned that we do a NFL prop show on the 4for4 YouTube channel every single Friday live at 2 p.m. Eastern time. If people want to tune into that, I believe I am 10-2 over the past 3 weeks. So if you're tuning in now, you're probably going to get like a huge cold streak. It's funny because I'm on a huge like sides and totals cold streak, but my props are just nailing. But earlier in the year, my props were horrible and my sides and totals were winning every single week. So you can never have both, can you?
You can't. No, you've been crushing. You've been, going off the board with some, Cooper rushing unders, which has been fantastic. I think as a collective unit, the three of us went, I think we were like 10-2 last week. I gave out some bonus tackle props. Those hit as well. There's one more on the board for tonight for the Monday Night Football game.
What is it? What is
Alex Singleton, linebacker for the Broncos, filling in for Josie Jewell, who is their typical linebacker. Singleton, former Philadelphia Eagle, former Canadian Football Leaguer, actually.
He sounds good.
Gets a lot of tackles. Got a nose for the football. Over 8.5. I think it like even plus 100, plus 105 in some spots. So 8.5 tackles.
Let's see, 8.5 tackles. Where do I find that? Is that on DST props?
Yeah, DST. And then typically they take you to sacks. You click over to tackles and assists. Tackles and assists.
So tackles and assists, 8.5 minus 110 at DraftKings Sportsbook right now. You say there's better numbers out there?
There are better numbers out there.
All right. So you shop around. You can still play the over 8.5, and maybe you can pay at plus 105 instead of minus 110. That'd always be something huge to look for. Let's go back to the CJ Cup. Should we take a look at Fitz? Like DraftKings wise, I assume he's not going to be very popular. Betting wise, I assume that he's not going to be very popular. It's kind of strange. Like all of the Euro guys that couldn't come through for us all year have basically won on this weird Euro swing. Lowry and Fitz and Rom all collect the dubs. And we've been betting them all year stateside and they couldn't do shit.
And I bet almost every time I bet Lowry, it was like a Fitz course too. So like I had so many weeks where like my top two plays on the board were both. And then I went like bombs for everyone else to fill out the card. So I mean, good for them because they've been like right there. I mean, obviously Fitz got the big one there in Boston, but I mean, we got to give him credit for everything, right? It was just, he could do it all. The putter could get red hot. It was never a guy that I would typically play because I feel like some of those magic bean stuff with like what we see with Jordan at times. Fitz was kind of that guy. And now all of a sudden, both of those guys have added a ton of distance. The approach game, especially on Fitz's side, is so consistent. So I have no problem going to Fitz. Was he 24, I think, on DraftKings? I think that's probably a fairly nice play because I do think he's kind of in that upper echelon guys, but you're not in the 16 or 14 range where you're having to pay for JT. I have no problem with Fitz. I think he's a really nice bet.
He's gone from 24 to 18 already. I was actually just kind of I was just kind of cruising around on Spieth's page here. If this does become an event, obviously the driver was really, it's a lot like Mito in a weird way. Like the driver was really good and then it kind of went away, but the approach play has still been fine. And then even to talk about President's Cup, like he actually kind of was the best guy at the President's Cup. He won all 5 of his matches, but just watching him because he was doing Spieth things, it's like, 45 feet per par, make it. Oh, great. I didn't have any money on Spieth this time around, but we're in South Carolina. It's a longer course, but I think we just kind of saw that you don't need, and like the average driving distance is over 300 yards. So even some of the guys that aren't super long are going to get extra rollout on their ball. And if it does become a thing where you're in the waste bunkers all the time, as long as his approach and his putting is fine, I don't see why Spieth can't compete here.
Who would we expect to do well out of just like random, waste and dirt outside of, the fairways? Like it's Spieth. And we talked about at the top where we have these short grass runoffs around the group. Around the green stuff and scrambling matter. I'm like, that is Jordan. We think we're going to need, some bomb putting performances. Like, I know sometimes it can get really wonky inside of 5 feet, but like, if you need a guy that's going to bury a couple of 45 footers, like he has some of these things. They're really hard to have them show up when we run models. But that's kind of the magic of Jordan. It's there. You just kind of have to know if everything else is going well. Like you said, if the approach game is playing well, the form has been great. Some of the other ancillary pieces that aren't always going to pop in a model are advantages for speed. We have enough of a history here, almost a decade of him being able to do these types of things. So yeah, he was a guy that I gave a very long look to this morning. He won in Harbortown in South Carolina. So not this is a guy that we need to have like regional bias for or even course bias for, but it's a box to check in our favor.
All right, so let's try to finalize what we're doing here. I'll have my final bets Tuesday evening in the Mayo Media newsletter. You can sub for free down in the description. Also has the Spread Picks link in it as well, a day early, if you want to check out the Spread Pick show with Feinberg and Cust and myself. So I think I'm going to narrow it down to these four unless I can be sold in a different direction. I'm going to shop around for the odds on this. Spieth, Hovland, Morikawa, Hatton. I think those were like my initial leans coming into the week as we've talked through a little bit. I'm a bit less bullish on this bomber narrative than you are. I think I'd really want to stick to approach above all if people can drive it. Even bet a nice to add on to it. I'll even give Griot a look too. What's Griot at? Griot is 70 to 1. I bet you can find him deeper than that down the board somewhere else. If I can find him close to 100, I might bet him too.
Yeah, I don't hate Griot. I mean, look at long par 4 scoring over the last 50 rounds or so. He's been outstanding, kind of to our point at the top. So no problem going with Grillo. I'm on Burns, Hovland, and Homa in that kind of top group. And Cam Davis was out there at 80 to 1 early on Monday morning.
Number.
So I thought that was a good number too. There was 60s out there too. I think he's down to 70 on DraftKings. So yeah, Cam Davis is the guy that I like kind of a little bit further down. There's some other guys like, again, if the bomber thing plays out, like a Trey Mullinex was interesting to me, but like, do I think Trey Mullinex is winning a 78-man no-cut event with a fairly loaded field? I don't. So like from a DraftKings perspective, maybe that's a guy that could be worth a look. As you mentioned, Woodland down the board is playing nice. I think those are probably some good looks a little bit deeper. Yeah,
Keith Mitchell. Brendan Steele popped up in the first round of the Zozo, then I assume he missed every putt the rest of the week, and that's why we didn't see him. I mean, I don't really need to watch the broadcast to know what happened with him, but Keegan just won again, although his putting had been vastly improved over the course of the past year, then he gets the win. It was the tournament like, it was in like Northeast Japan? Is that why he ended up winning?
I don't know where it was in Japan, but yeah, I mean, Steele and Keegan we had barely played there before, but Brandon Steele and Keegan had popped there in short form previously. So yeah, you're right on with Brandon Steele. He dunked one on 18 on Sunday, or on 17, I think on Sunday to give himself the first round leader, and then was just not heard from again. So yeah, ball striking is still going to pop for running anything Brandon Steele wise, similar to what we saw for Keegan for 5 years, but Keegan's learned how to putt a little bit. So yeah, the same story for Brandon Steele.
All right, that will do it on the Pat Mayo Experience for the CJ Cup. A reminder to check out Fantasy Golf Degenerates with Tambo and Kenny Monday evening. They'll go tier by tier for the more enhanced breakdown of the DraftKings board. I want to talk to Noonan, just get a feel for this event to see where I want to go. The final bets will be in the newsletter on Tuesday. The Listeners League for football is down in the description. You get first shot at it. So check that out as well. Smash the like and go to fantasynational.com/Mayo to get yourself 20% off. For Ryan, I'm Pat Mayo. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!